Greetings, everyone, and welcome once more. We're heading back in time to talk about the history of Magic the Gathering, another product in time. We're going to talk about the product, its release, cards were in it, all those kind of things. We've basically been touring Magic the Gathering and its product releases through history. Today's another of the Duel Deck series, Venser vs. Koth, 9th in the entire series. So if you're ready to travel back in time to 2012, take my hand. I'm your host and guide here at Dracovin. I can open the time portal back to 2012. You just have to remember to give me a little tip before we leave. Subscribe over the YouTube time side of things and let me know, did you own Venser vs. Koth, or what do you think about this? Yeah, give me your honest opinions when we talk about it. Alright, time portal's open. Let's get rock and rolling. We've arrived! 2012! Alright, Venser vs. Koth. Yes, as I said, 9th in the Duel Deck series, and it was released on March 20th of 2012. Its MSRP was $19.99. $20. Pretty good price for that. This was its symbol, which represented... I don't know what the hell it represents. They don't really describe it very much. The entire product was designed by Chris Miller and Mark Gottlieb. Both of them designed and developed it. This is supposed to be a little bit of Dominaria, a little bit Mirrodin, but multi-universal overall because Venser's Dominaria, Koth is Mirrodin. There's a lot of enters the battlefield effects, some fire breathing, mountain matters, equipment, a little bit of landfall. The fact is, there really isn't themes per se to these decks, and that's something we're going to talk about in a minute that makes them very bad. And these were two 60-card theme decks. Again, we've barely gotten into our toes dipped into the commander zone of things, so we're getting still a lot of more 60-card standard decks at this time period. Here's what the product looked like. So, again, the two pre-constructed theme decks centered around Venser the Sojourner and Koth the Hammer. And the entire storyline was supposed to be the two of them battling it out. And it was supposed to be something more... well, look, it was very flavor-based theme deck. That's really what it ended up being. And when critics got a hold of this, they hated it. Because it was all flavor, no substance. It lacked power. It was not really favorable cards. The card interaction or synergy didn't really exist. It was broad but shallow approach to themes and mechanics. That's what people saw it as. And again, it's... I don't think that perhaps has a lot of popularity. I'm sure it's got, like, price nowadays. Just quickly looking here. Yeah, I can get this for $50 now, unopened. After 12 years. $50. There really isn't a lot to this. Unfortunate. Now, we did have alternate art treatments of a number of cards. First off being Koth and Venser. Hey, it turns out when you have a deck based around two Planeswalkers, you get alternate art versions of those Planeswalkers. Koth here, an interesting Planeswalker introduced in Mirrodin block just recently. Untaps a mountain and turns into a creature that's still land, gives you mana for each mountain you control for a tick down, or gives you an emblem that your mountain's tapped to do damage. Venser, on the other hand, another of the now alternate art versions of him, taps up to exile target and returns to the battlefield at the next end step, so blink stuff, makes your creatures unblockable for a blink down, or gives you an emblem when you cast a spell, exile target permanent. I'm not going to lie, Venser is both better and worse than Koth. Koth is a lot easier to get a big alt off of. But it's a tick of 1, so you have to take 3 turns. Venser, you also have to take 3 turns to get up to at least 9. And Venser's one exiling a permanent is very good, but Mountain's tapping to do damage is very good. The tick down for Koth, probably pretty useful, but it's expensive then if you're only picking with 1. The tick down for Venser, making creatures unblockable, very good. It's interesting that they don't compare very well. Now, the other alternate art cards were, well, none of them were the rares. They were all uncommons and commons. But we got an alternate art Anger. If it's your graveyard, you have a mountain, your creatures have haste. We had an alternate art Chartooth Cougar. these are all new arts to these cards. So they're alternate art, but these are new arts that were never seen from. So Mountain Cycles, you can discard it for 2 mana, search your library for a mountain, reveal it from your hand, and it has Fire Ring. Path to Exile in the Venser deck had its new one, exiling a creature and the controller searching for a basic land, putting it down to a tap. Played a GOP, a first strike that has a landfall. When a land enters, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Honestly, pretty poor and weak, but it's in the deck. And then, of course, Preordain, where you scry 2 to draw a card. Look at your top 2 cards, put any of them on the bottom of your library if you want, and then you draw a card. These were all the alternate art cards that existed in the deck. We also had, of course, 2 emblems that were part of this deck. Hey, each deck had an emblem. It represents the 2 ones here that basically each had an emblem. The Venser one putting its emblem out, and the Koth one putting out its emblem. These were kind of like the tokens of the decks. Now, there technically was a story that we have to talk about here, because basically the battle between these 2 occurred during the Quest for Karn novel, shown here, which basically was the Scars of Mirrodin block, and basically they got into a battle. Basically, Koth traveled from Mirrodin to help, his world when the Phyrexis were attacking with Dominaria. He got into kind of a scuffle with Venser, ended up getting his help afterwards, and then, so it's sort of like they, usual 2 people getting together, getting tough, and then they kind of like do the hand clasp with Predator handshake, and are like, yeah, I'll help you out fight the Phyrexians, and yeah. That's basically it. Let's talk about the rares that were in this deck, because these are the closest thing to anything good. Each of the decks, beyond the Planeswalker they had 5 rares. So it was a total of 6 rares. It sounds good if the rares were really, really good. Clone is not bad, but it's not great. There are other better cloning spells as of now, but even during that time, it wasn't necessarily the best. And these are the 5 from the Venser deck. Enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature you control. We also had Blade Powder Mage, a Kith King Wizard. When it attacks X on a target creature, return to the battlefield with controller's next instant. So it has the blink ability of Venser, so you'd hope you have better come into play effects. You don't. That's why I said plus. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not a great thing. The Sphinx has a come into battlefield effects. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. Opponent separates in 2 piles. 1 goes in your hand, the other goes in the graveyard. It's not great, it's okay, because he has 7 mana for a 5/6 Sphinx. That's a better target to blink. It's still not great. Sunblast Angel, when it enters fields, destroy all tapped creatures. Another one that's not bad to blink. But Sunblast Angel is a board wipe that you're basically protecting yourself from an attack with maybe like a white spell. I mean, basically Safe Passage was in this deck. And I'm not mentioning the commons or uncommons because they're fine. They're not great, And so, I prevent you from killing me this turn. I nuke all your stuff with Sunblast Angel. Or I blink it. And the final one being Wind Reaver, a flying that can give it vigilance, poke off its toughness, switches power and toughness, or return it to its owner's hands. It's fine. Uses a lot of mana. You can give it a lot of toughness and then make its power be really high. And then maybe give it some more toughness after you've made its power very high. You want it to live. It's fine. None of these are terrible, but they aren't great, especially, and they're not really. More come into play effects, more blinking effects would have been more of an interesting deck, and there was better cards that you could have put in there to focus on that kind of blink in and out, come into play effects of that. They didn't. Alright, let's talk about the ones that we have from Caustic. We have Bloodfire Colossus, which you can sacrifice to do 6 damage to each creature and player. A board wipe. Great. I mean, if you need to, you can. But again, I feel like mountains, burn, maybe making mountains into elementals, That could have been a better theming to go along with the abilities of Koth. You know, make mountains give you extra mana, make them become creatures more often, have creature lands. There's a lot better Koth. And, of course, it doesn't work on point because you want your mountains with Lithophage. Because you sacrifice unless you sacrifice a mountain. Yeah! Its theming is terrible. This is good in maybe like a green-red deck, where you can get lands back into play, or play more lands, and then for 5 mana you get a 7/7. But Lithophage has never really been that good. Never really. Torchling is interesting. You can force something to block it. Change the target of a spell that targets only Torchling. Make it get +1, -1, or -1, +1. Torchling is again another one that I'm like, it's not great. Here's the other thing. These are worse than the blue ones. The Venser ones, I should say. Journeyer's Kite is not bad in certain ways, especially if you have things that you want to have a lot of mountains. Search your library, face the and deal it, but this puts it in your hand! It puts it in your hand! Yeah, I can get a land drop every turn, but it's not putting it into play. Again, it's just kind of poor. And of course, the final card for rares for your Volley of Boulders, which is 6 damage divided among any number of targets for 9 mana! And flashing it back for 6 red. 9 mana! These decks suck. It's an unfortunate thing is, there are still decent cards in here, and there are some decent concepts to begin with. But as the viewer said, it was very broad. I'm not going to say these decks couldn't work. They couldn't play well. They couldn't win with them. You could. But they suck in, not that they are necessarily terrible decks overall. They suck that they don't feel like they are a Venser or Koth decks. The Koth deck even less. The Koth deck is just some kind of red deck, it feels like. It doesn't feel like a Koth deck. It doesn't go with the themes that you see from his Planeswalker card. It does not have a large amount of burn spells, or maybe creatures that allow mountains to do burning stuff. You sacrifice mountains, for heck's sake! I feel like the thing is, these aren't very well designed for the Planeswalkers they're supposed to represent, and that's a big thing here. Where very easily we could see the directions you could take with them, even in that time period. And that's a very interesting thing here. Again, they aren't necessarily terrible cards. I'm going to say, the red deck is a lot worse than the Venser deck, the Koth deck. Unfortunately, it feels worse, and looks worse, and the rares are kind of worse. I like the word rares in the Venser deck better than the Koth deck. Not all of them are bad in the Koth deck. Journeyer's Kite isn't terrible. Bloodfire Colossus is a board wipe. Lithophage, if you have a lot of mountains, is not bad. It's a 7/7. Volley of Boulders and Torchling can have their uses, but they're not great cards. There are so many better cards that are still also not expensive you could put into these decks. It's one of the reasons that maybe the Planeswalkers are the reason that these decks actually retained any kind of value. I'm going to put that out, the reason that this deck is like $50, probably the Planeswalkers. And they're not very expensive. I so. I'm sure some of these cards have a little bit of value. No, none of them. None of them are any value. If you wanted copies of these cards, they're less than $1 each. I guess it's $50 instead of $20 this week because it's unopened. And it's at least 2 decks. And the Venser and Koth aren't bad. They're like, $5 a piece. You get them. So that's not a bad piece. Again, we saw this in previous series of products that poor products ended up killing them. It's why the premium deck series died. Because it was an expensive deck series, but they never quite lived up to the original Sliver. This is the Duel Deck series kind of falling apart a little bit. Now, we still have more Duel Decks to come. This isn't the end of the series, but we are on that kind of midpoint of the series. We are 9 in. There are a lot more. The Duel Deck series went to 2018, so we got 6 more years of them. But I feel like because they were cheaper, not as good, it's kind of a sign of, if this is what we could be, unless we got big ones to kind of keep it going, we could have been dead here. Would I have paid $20 for this? Sure. Venser, Koth, they're decent. I think they were more expensive at the time, and they're not terrible planeswalkers, but some decks. And some of the cards do have use. I can definitely see uses for things like the Sunblast Angel, Clone always, the Sphinx, Gale Powder Mage even some of the ones in Koth's deck, Journeyer's Kite, Bullfire Colossus. Certainly I can see points and places for these cards. But it's still just kind of. But there, we'll leave it there. I hope you enjoyed diving into it. It's one of those unfortunate things that sometimes some of these products, they're just at most okay. This is one of those. It's not a terrible product. Overall, it's okay, but just is not on theme. Anyway, if you want to see more of my stuff, please check it out, whether you're live with me over on Twitch or over the YouTube side of things. All my tabletop stuff from Twitch does end up on YouTube. That's all the stuff that goes to YouTube. That's just tabletop over there. But that's kind of things like live recordings and stuff like this. My live plays of TTRPGs, like Fall Guys and Swolls Wednesdays at 8. But you can catch any of my old ones over on YouTube also. Discussing tabletop Saturdays at 6, my kind of talk show, podcasting kind of thing, where we talk about news of the week and interesting deeper discussion topics. Again, all that tabletop stuff ends up on YouTube, but over on the Twitch side, I also do some variety gaming, games with friends, hanging out, and stuff like that. So if you want to catch me just doing that, or just chat, you can. Check out my social media link below for updates on schedule, what's going on, and sometimes some cat pics or interesting thoughts that I have. Discord's a big place to see this for. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed joining me today. Until the next time, we talk about the history of Magic, something related to Magic, something related to something else tabletop. I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.